Welcome to Love and Speak the Truth with me, Sister Brenda, the podcast where all voices are heard with diverse guests from all over the globe. We make space for stories of integrity, justice, freedom, and joy. So come along. We're not afraid to get into the tough stuff, and we're actually not afraid to laugh along the way. So buckle up, open your heart, open your mind, and let's get this party started. We're delighted to welcome Sister Ann Stafford, CJ, and Dr. Hannah Thomas, curator and archivist of the Bar Convent in York, England. Together, they offer a rich and compelling understanding of our living history and the enduring significance of the Bar Convent, its place, its people, and its moment in time. The color and the lines of history for the founder of Mary Ward and the gift of her charism, her upbringing, and her influence around the world today. Their scholarship is matched by an infectious energy and passion that make history feel vibrant, urgent, and alive. Yes, we want to welcome today Sister Ann Stafford and Dr. Hannah Thomas. I am so excited to have you both here all the way from England, York to be specific. Let me ask you, why is it important, do you think, that we know something about a woman from the 16th century? What relevance is that to today, do you think? And why is it that you do what it is that you do, bring that living legacy to us?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that Mary Ward is the most amazing woman. We had a member of staff who termed her the most famous person you've never heard of. And that is absolutely true. Her story is astonishing. What this woman did in the 16th, 17th century, I think people today would just balk at. They wouldn't be able to do it. And because of the time that she was born and what she wanted to do was so ahead of her time, she was silenced. And that's why, in a sense, we haven't heard very much about her, because the church silenced her. She was imprisoned as a heretic. And that went on until Catholic emancipation, when the Catholics in England were able to be more open. And then we went on with a Vatican Council and the opening up of the foundresses, and we began to look back to Mary Ward and her wonderful legacy and all she's given to us.
Yeah, I think for me, because I think anybody in the world, I mean, we're not even talking, so she's a Yorkshire woman in the 17th century. She lives and dies in that period. But actually, anybody in the world who has come across any of the sisters that are under Mary Ward's family, so whether that's the Loretto sisters, the CJ sisters, which is now one huge family that work in literally every corner of the world, and are still changing people's lives. They're in South Sudan, they're in Ukraine, they're in America, they're in the Philippines, they're in Mauritius, they're in England, they're in Wales, they're literally everywhere in the world. And anybody who's come across any of those sisters, whether it's through the school, through their work, through their just meeting them, anybody who's ever met a Mary Ward sister, you leave that conversation knowing you have met a Mary Ward sister. You never meet any example of a sister in that order that doesn't wear that in the most positive, kind of uplifting, but down to earth way. So I think she's extremely relevant in that sense. I think she herself may have lived 400 years ago, but her story is still massively inspiring. I mean, just South Sudan is one of the examples I will often give people. So the sisters there in South Sudan, it's this incredible modern school that they've built. And I was chatting with one of the sisters about it. They couldn't get girls to come to school because they had to choose between school or water, because they had to walk a certain distance to get water. So the sister I was talking to said, we just built wells in the ground of the school. So the girls are sent out on a walk to get the water. The wells are in the school grounds. So the sisters say, well, pop in for a couple of hours, have a couple of lessons, have some education, and then go home with your bucket full of water. And the sister I was talking to was so pragmatic about this. she was just sort of, well, obviously, we built the wells in the school as if it was nothing. And it's just such a small decision that's going to have such a huge impact on so many lives, so many families, so many girls, create so many opportunities. And that's just one school in one place in one country.
Right.
It's incredibly inspirational.
We're going to have an interview with Sister Orla, and I'm sure she's going to carry on with the great inspiration of being in a place where there's so much great need. I want to step back just a little bit with the two of you. So maybe perhaps you can tell me your story as Mary Ward women. So we have sisters Ann, who is a Mary Ward woman from, I think, infancy, and Hannah, you are a Mary Ward woman by profession or maybe before. Tell me about your life as a Mary Ward and why are you in this anyway?
Well, I had two aunts who joined the congregation. My eldest aunt failed to get into a profession that her parents thought would be good for her. She didn't want to go into that profession. So her parents went back to the sisters in Dorky and said, what are we going to do with her?
Mhm.
And they said, well, it might be good, just send her over to England to the sisters in Ascot and see what happens. And she goes, and the next thing, she wants to join them. And then the next sister goes along to have a year at Ascot as well. She joins. And then my mother went as well, and another aunt. And then the war came. And so the parents were getting older. And so the provincial at the time thought it would be good for them to see their parents. So they were allowed to go back to Ireland after the war in 1946. And it just happened that I was 6 months old at the time. Then time went on for me. And like following my mother, I also had a year. I was already thinking that, well, I've got one life. What can I do with this life? And I was brought up in a very Catholic family, and God was important. And I said to God, well, I've just got one life. And I felt he was saying to me, well, can you give that life to me? And when I met the Mary Ward sisters at Shaftesbury, I saw their joy. They were so different to the sisters I'd seen in Ireland. I thought, yes, these are the people I would be happy to spend my life with.
Well, awesome. Hannah, how did you come to this enterprise?
I think probably by accident is the short version. But I think actually looking back, there's always kind of been a little pull back or to the Bar Convent. I studied Welsh Catholic history, so for my PhD, but before that I did it at undergraduate level. So in your third year of university, you had to choose a module, and then your dissertation would come out of that module. I characteristically left it until the very last minute to choose my module because I live my life in the last minute, despite my best efforts not to be that person. There was only a space left on the Russian history module or the Catholic history module. And I thought, well, I've got no chance for Russian history because I know nothing. Whereas I grew up as a Catholic, I could probably, manage a dissertation out of that. And then we went on a field trip to a place that had been a Jesuit college in Wales on the Wales-England border. And I smacked my head on a sort of a low window in that house, really kind of whacked myself. And that was the same building I ended up studying for my PhD a few years later. So it was kind of the building was saying, like, hello, it's you. Can you come back? And so I worked on a collection of books that had been seized from that building in 1679, taken to Hereford Cathedral, and nobody looked at them since. So they'd been waiting there for 400 years. So I was looking into lots of families. So the two main families that I was looking at were the Wigmores and the Pointses. So two Welsh borderland Catholic families. They did a lot to support the Welsh Catholic community. Lots of sons became Jesuits. And then, as I discovered, Winifred Wigmore, Mary Point were right-hand companions of Mary Ward. So these names were, as familiar to me as my own family by the end, because obviously with PhD study, it's really, intense and a deep study of them. And then after my PhD, I ended up doing a postdoctoral project on convent cemeteries. I'm happy to talk about convent cemeteries for a lot longer than you'd expect there to be a conversation for. So that was on an English order called the Canonesses of the Holy Sepulchre. They were founded in Liège in 1642, and the first house they lived in Liège was the house that Mary Ward's sisters had lived in during their time in Liège. So Mary Ward just kept sort of popping up, and it wasn't really until I ended up getting this job that I realised she'd sort of been leading me through, really. And then I came for the interview for this job at the Bar Convent. They put me in a rather scary room to test my abilities, to see how they to cope with the interview. The sort of very formal parlour with portraits all around it, a kind of very formal space. And the first two portraits I saw were Winifred Wigmore and Mary Points. And I said, "Oh, that's Winifred Wigmore." And so she said instantly, they were like, "Well, obviously you know this place. The job is yours," kind of thing. She still put me through my paces, I have to say.
You're both historians, it sounds like. You both know the story of Mary Ward well. And you actually come from very different generations. What does history have to offer today's world? Just let me branch out a bit further. Here in the U.S., we don't know our histories very well. Our history is sort of diluted with all kinds of issues of whether it be politics or segregation or culture or race, what have you. And so history kinds of winds and moves out, and people understand it from a different perspective. But this is Hannah, in particular, your profession. But what makes history important for us today? What does it have to teach us?
I think it is really important, and I think particularly, I think the culture that we're living through at the moment, and I think particularly, say for example, American politics and this sort of culture of finding an other to blame. I think even in recent history, we can see patterns now in the world that we saw, 80 years ago, in the 1930s, in the 1920s, with all the, sowing the seeds of what ended up, being the kind of Nazi regime, for example. So I think even something as recent as, World War II, politics and everything, kind of all the conditions that led to, that the horrific situations that so many people found themselves in. I think you need to understand where you've come from to understand where you're going. Sometimes you need to see, what you've achieved, what hasn't been achieved, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I think ultimately history, I think the word itself sounds a bit scary, but actually it's just people. It's just people. It's the stories of people dealing with their circumstances in the best way that they know how, reacting to, whether it's political changes, religious changes, racial change, whatever it is that's happening around them. History is actually the story of people. I have a real bugbear with we in the UK particularly. We tend to divide between academic history and public history, and I really, really hate the phrase public history, because if history isn't appealing to the public, you're not doing it right. If it's there shouldn't be a way of telling a story that alienates people. History should be something that is accessible and open to everybody, so that we can learn from it and we can understand it and we can appreciate what people have been through and how we got to where we are, and learn where we need to go from here.
Yes, yes. Oh, beautiful. I really resonate with that, because I think that we as human beings, we strive for perfection often, but we rarely realize that perfection that we're striving for is out of reach unless we're in touch with who we are in the moment and where we've come to in this time. And we grow from that. In our religious tradition, the discernment that comes with being a part of something bigger, a part of something richer and deeper. We just didn't appear. We've come from something. And hopefully we can have the vision that we're going somewhere. And I think that's a big inspiration that Mary Ward gives me personally. Anyway, Sister Brenda, you might want to jump in here and share a little bit about the importance of history for you.
Well, I loved history at school as a child. I mean, it was one of the subjects that I really, really enjoyed. So I'm not an academic or a historian, but it's just a personal love that I have. And so the stories that come out from way back, we can learn from them. And I think particularly that really struck me when as I was talking to Sister Brenda before we began this podcast. We've had a situation here at the Bar Convent last Saturday where we were looking at a book about Mary Ward with a man who has written it called Sidney Thorne and a member of our staff, Hannah Wilkinson, who's very interested in literature and people. And it was a question and answer session. But actually, it was very much about what we are talking about now, because we were talking about this amazing woman, Mary Ward. But the subtitle to this book had to do with feminism. Now, she was never a feminist. She wouldn't even understood that. But what she did understand was that there's no difference between men and women, that women may not do great things. Now, only today, I was talking to Sister Agatha, and in this conversation, she had a card from one of the sisters from Cambridge, where we have a community. And this sister, Gemma, had just come, when she wrote this, from the confirmation of Sarah Mullally as the Archbishop of Canterbury. And I could see Agatha's face was screwing up in horror. And she says, I don't agree with that. And I said to her, Sister Agatha, do you not know that Mary Ward said that there was no difference between men and women, that women may not do great things? And surely this is a great thing that a woman is now doing. And her face changed. And she said, oh, yes, you've got a point there. So I think that we can link history with our own personal lives.
Oh, yes. When I was thinking about this interview today, I did think of Mary Ward saying women to come in time will do great things, because it sounds very normal that women are doing many of the same things men are doing now. There's nothing profound in that statement today, but that was a profound statement in her time. And if we take for granted that idea today, we lose the impact of we're still not there. Women are
No.
still second class in many
No.
places in the world, and in our societies, women do not have the same reach as the men. And so we can learn from that, and I completely agree that this is the type of thing that we need to integrate. Hannah, you said something about this public history. What were the two terms that you used?
There's a sort of division in, particularly in academics, so sort of academic history and public history. And public history is almost a sort of like a second tier type of history. And it's sometimes said in some academic circles, it's talked about as sort of a lesser history, or it's a less scholarly or less important because it's aimed at a more general audience. So things like TV history or documentaries that are kind of sensationalized to sort of focus on on the exciting bits of the story. And I think it's just such a wrong term, really. It's just the idea of there being a separate history that's sort of for less intelligent people almost. Problem that we have in not learning from history is because there's this sense that history exists in this kind of academic ivory tower. If it's not in the academic circle, it's not worth learning about. But actually, it's the stories of the people, where we've all come from. As you said, we don't all just arrive fully formed. We are all the product of people who have had to cope with whatever it is, difficulties, whether they are, what the colour of their skin, their gender, their role in life, their position in society, whatever it is. We are all descended from people who have coped with those things and who have learned from those things. And I think that's what history should be telling us.
Yes. Yes. Now, as archivist and historian and as director of the Bar Convent, what are the kinds of things that you see people interested in terms of what you're sharing, what you're teaching? You both do such amazing work with gathering people and sharing the story of Mary Ward in particular. Sister Ann was just talking about the group coming from Australia to learn and to be formed. What's the impact of all that in your work?
Well, it's absolutely huge because as I said, that Mary Ward is the most important person you've never heard of. And, when I have a group of people and I would say, how many of you have heard of Mary Ward? Very few hands go up. And this is astonishing. And then when I tell her story, and the story of the women after her, and the story of the history of the Bar Convent, the hidden chapel, and what the Bar Convent used to be. It is the oldest girls' school, we think, in the British Isles, and that there's a school there since 1686. I mean, that is astonishing. And that school went on right through the ages, through all the history that we've been, difficult history, persecution history, isolation, then freedom with Catholic emancipation, the development of the modern world, the changing in the school system, and now the school on our site is a comprehensive, over 1,000 students. We've now got this wonderful heritage centre telling the story of Mary Ward, and people who come to that, you only have to look at the book that they've signed, all have been awestruck by what they have found. And this now is very modern. It's interactive. Children can get the experience of what it must be like to be in a priest's hiding hole. We have the painted life of Mary Ward, where you can flick through it and know exactly what's happening in each panel. And people really are very interested. It is a revelation to them. They just don't know the heritage that this amazing woman has left to us. And how, her inspiration, she passed it on to her companions, and it's gone right down the centuries. You find what Hannah was saying about the Sudan, that they're practical people. Her sisters are down to earth. She wanted us to be ordinary. She didn't want us standing up on pedestals. We had to get our hands dirty and do what was necessary. So that's the message that we pass on.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, so my job is sort of the heritage, basically, of the story. So I think there's a couple of aspects to it that I think are everybody reacts the same. So the first is people have the idea of nuns and a convent. Everybody instantly, whether you're religious or not, you hear the word nun, everyone's got an image in their head. Whether it's Sister Act or The Sound of Music or whatever it is, everyone's got an instant image in their head, and then they come in this building, and I'm sure all my friends have got this sense of me working in this prayerful, quiet space with people gliding past prayerfully, silently. You spend any longer than 3 minutes in this building, and that illusion is shattered. In the best possible way. So anybody who's ever crossed the threshold and met Sister Anne at the front door has an amazing conversation and wants to come back time and time again. And then the other thing is York's history itself. So York as a city is really well known worldwide. Heritage buildings, loads of people come here on their holidays to see history, to see heritage. Very few of them have come to the Bar Convent. It's something we're working towards to encourage those visitor numbers. And that's partly because I think the word convent, sometimes people are a bit reluctant to cross the threshold without being invited in. It's a little bit of a mental barrier sometimes. And people think they know York. York has got this well-known story about the shambles and the minster and all those bits. And actually this building and these sisters, Mary Ward's sisters and legacy, have been just quietly sitting here just outside the city walls. They've just been quietly improving the lives of the people in this community without any fuss, without any show. They've been living under the shadow of, being an illegal community. Everything they're doing is effectively an act of treason for quite a long period of their history. So from 1686 until 1829, it is effectively an act of treason to be running a Catholic school, to be taking vows as a Catholic sister, to be helping people to celebrate Mass, to celebrate sacraments, and they're just doing it. They are quietly, calmly locating themselves in a position where they can help people regardless of, what that law says. They run a medical clinic from the back door of the convent for about 100 years, so in the 18th century. And they're just doing all of this in a really sort of understated, pragmatic, practical way, but with a sense of humour as well. And I think what's lovely is you can really see the type of women that they are. So even though we're talking, we were saying earlier, Mary Ward is 400 years away from us, But actually, when you read about her as a person, I've met Mary Ward in all her forms, in Sister Anne and Sister Agatha, in the sisters I met in Loyola, all the sisters, they've just got that same characteristic, that kind of pragmatic, no nonsense, down to earth, but getting stuff done, and with a smile as well.
Mm. Subversives and feminists and people who are there, the Christian act of the ground up, the poor, the disadvantaged, the people who need the presence of God in their lives. No big show, no television cameras, nothing. Just simply doing that great work. And it's historic.
Yeah, very much so.
And we were open to new ministries all the time. And 8 years ago, Father Tony Lester, who is a priest, felt very called to the LGBT plus community and really felt that this was a ministry he could be part of. So he approached us and he said, please, would it be possible for us to have a monthly mass in your chapel for this community that had been excluded from the Catholic Church for centuries? And as everybody totally agreed and said, yes, you are most welcome. And a wonderful community has now built up with this ministry. Everybody's welcome. Nobody is excluded. After a couple of masses, this person came up to me and she said, you have no idea what you have done for me. She said, at last I found a home. So it's that being open, and that's what Mary Ward, she was open to everything. And even again, going back to that wonderful Saturday where we had this conversation, she introduced drama into her education. And at that time, only boys were ever actors on the stage. So Mary Ward may have been the first person to put a woman on the stage.
How about that?
How about that?
My whole formation, we learned about Mary Ward and we learned about all the trials and tribulations and the things that she had to overcome. And I see a lot of that playing out today when you think about how in her time, as a subversive, they had to hide the priest because there was this Catholic persecution. And now in this country, we're hiding migrants and we're standing in protest lines and we're holding signs saying, these are our neighbors, these are our brothers and sisters. You have people from all walks of life coming together to stand for the people who are being persecuted. And sometimes we do it in quiet ways, and sometimes we do it in out loud ways. And right now we have the push to make Mary Ward to be a saint. I think if she were alive today, she might shy away from sainthood because it's not about being perfect and saintly and religious in the most narrow sense of the word. What you said, Anne, about being open, being inclusive. We have things that are off limits now in our country. We're not supposed to aspire to being people of equity and diversity, and inclusion. History teaches us that we must do that, or we were at war and then in violence against one another. We're tearing down humanity. Anyway, I'm getting a little preachy here. Perhaps we can share a little bit about the significance of doing this work right now at the Bar Convent and how that expands out into the world. You're a very young person there, Hannah. I think young people are looking for meaning in so many ways. We find it in artificial intelligence, but I think most of us are looking for emotional intelligence. Most of us want connection, want to belong to something deeper, wider, meaningful. What's the significance of your work in that?
I think for me, because I always feel like it's an absolute privilege to be on the inside of this building, because we've heard all the anecdotally and otherwise, we've heard all these amazing stories, all these amazing welcomes. Sister Anne is, I've sort of said it half jokingly, but the welcome that anybody gets walking in through this door. I think the church, there's sort of two different versions of the church almost. There's the kind of the official, the face that a lot of people associate with the Catholic Church, and then there's the kind of the reality of the work that happens, here under this roof, and in that same church's name. And I think if more of the church was operating on this same level and in this same way and in that same openness, I think we'd be having very different conversations in a sort of wider sense. And I think just to be able to watch, the incredible work, and my work is a tiny part of making sure those stories are kept for future generations. The real work happens, with the sisters and has always happened with all the work that they do and the people that they help and the connections that they make and the impact that they have on people's lives is just, it's immeasurable, but in an amazing way. Yeah, just the fact that that's a job that I get to do and to help those stories to be told is just, it's amazing. And I mentioned I was in Loyola earlier, so I know, Brenda, you were there too. The coming together of the two branches and being a witness to that in November for a week. The fact that these sisters are doing this same incredible work in every country in the world is just mind-blowing. And to be able to witness that and keep those stories and tell those stories is a total privilege.
Yes, I felt that same way when I arrived in Loyola, Spain, and the enthusiasm for our global community. There was something that rooted in this one woman from the 16th century, and all of us from 90 years old down to 20s came together to celebrate and to sing and to give thanks to God for her life and the impact, that she's made in the world. I completely agree, Hannah. There's something inspirational for my own life to be able to be a part of something so inclusive and so powerful for the witness to who we can be as human beings in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
But something I'd like to go back to, Brenda, or is Mary Ward's own self.
Mhm.
And, it's her own spiritual journey, her own training, her own background, and the impact that her family, particularly her grandmother, then Catherine Ardington and Lady Babthorpe, these women of prayer, these women who knew God deeply, who knew the wonder of God, the wonder of God's love, and they passed their love onto her. They taught her how to pray. They taught her how to live like when her grandmother, imprisoned for 16 years for her faith in the horrible Hull jail, and then not forgetting the people who were still there when she left and feeding them. And that Mary Ward saw that example of how she took the food to these people, and she had this little pet hen that she was very fond of. But when she saw that there were other people who needed food, she was ready to sacrifice her little pet hen for these poor people in prison. So from a very, very early age, she was witnessing what it was to follow and to live the Christian message and the life of Jesus.
I think those women kind of also gave her, the example of having courage in your convictions as well. Those three examples of women, that they're all, as Sister Ann said, they've been imprisoned for their faith. So that is for, a public, visible commitment to an illegal faith at that point. So they've made a choice. So she's also witnessed the fact that faith actually sometimes comes with the sacrifices. So we have a quote on the Archives Office whiteboard that says, something like, "Take heart," is one of Mary Ward's quotes, "for what's not done in one year will be done in the next."
Yes.
Just that belief that actually it doesn't matter what the world is telling you right now. If you believe it and if you have courage in those convictions, it will happen. There will be a way for it to happen, whether it's next year or in 100 years or in 300 years, or whatever it is. I think she really gets that. It's that double-sided kind of the faith and the pragmatism that she really gets from those examples, those incredible, courageous women that she herself instills in all the future generations as well.
Amen to that. You know what? I think that this conversation has helped me to drive home that idea that if well-defined women of purpose come together with this feminine energy, that Mary Ward talked about, women to come will do great things. I think we could have peace in the world, don't you?
Mm, yeah.
I think it would really happen.
But the other thing I'd love to talk about too, Brenda, is about her humour, because that was something that came out very much last Saturday. She had a huge sense of humour. She had a great daring in her, like going to visit the Archbishop of Canterbury for recreation, when all he wanted to do was to put her in prison and shut her up. And, her friends were delighted that he wasn't there because they knew that what would happen to her. And what does she do? She leaves her signature on the window of his home. And then when she's dying, and they're all sort of very sad about round her bed, she said, "For heaven's sake," then it begins to sing, and say, "Be careful," And this was actually something that I got from last Saturday, was this huge humor and cheerfulness that she had in her life, which she also passed on.
Indeed.
It's a real sense of fun as well, isn't it? There's a real sense of
Yes.
enjoying things, even if the things are difficult, which they are sometimes. But just her mirth is definitely something that I relate to, particularly with her as well. I think it just makes her a lot more real as well as a person, doesn't it?
Yeah, so much. She's relatable. Even today, she brings life into the faith that we're committed to doing what Jesus wanted us to do and what the church is required to do, isn't it? I would like to come to a little bit of a conclusion by asking you this. What's love got to do with all of this? Ultimately, what's love got to do with it?
I think it's got everything to do with it. I mean,
Full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just look at Mary's life. It is full of love. And what Jesus said, "Love one another as I have loved you." I mean, we didn't have to do that. Well, we might as well go home. There's no point in us being here.
Right? Yes. Yes. So I want to just thank you both for the joy that you've brought into this conversation for me. Great insight, very many connections to my own experience here on this side of the pond.
It's been lovely to be with you.
And now for the wrap-up. You have just had a human experience from a spiritual being. We have so much to learn. So go forth to love and speak the truth. Ad majorem Dei gloriam. A couple of announcements. Don't forget to rate and follow us on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We are on Facebook at Love Speak Truth, and visit our website at www.lovespeaktruth.org. For a few credits, when all is said and done, I give thanks and credit for sponsors, producers, and contributors who made this podcast possible. Mega shout out to IBVM Region Leadership, Megan Butel, Jennifer Schmitz, Laurenti Wright for the keyboard music, the late Sister Maria Beer IBVM for her composition of the music Women Bearing Witness. It takes a village, folks. Thanks for listening to Love Speak Truth.